It was October the 14th when my nephew Dennis called and wanted his dad and I to meet him to go crappie fishing the next morning. Dennis likes to go early, so at the appointed time, my brother and I headed out and made the 1.5 hour drive down to Lake of the Ozarks, arriving there shortly before 6. When we arrived, Dennis was already backing the boat into the lake. As we headed out across the lake, the weather was perfect, including a nice breeze. We always like a little wind when we fish for crappie. When we arrived at our fishing spot, Dennis was already catching fish before my brother and I even got our rods ready to go. I couldn't believe it when right in the middle of the fishing action, my brother decided that he would rather eat than fish. This is a nice white crappie. Notice the jig hanging from its mouth. All we used was plastic crappie jigs on this trip. Most of the crappie we caught on this trip were black crappie. On several trips during the year, we will catch more white crappie than blacks. Depends on where you're fishing and what kind of water you're fishing. We caught about a half a dozen of these little whites.
Damage. There you go.
The jugs you see in the water are not ours, Somebody else was floating jugs for catfish in the same water that we were crappie fishing in. This guy is a little spotted bass. We caught 7 or 8 of these little spots and largemouth bass combined. When we first started fishing, the crappie were holding close to the bank, but later in the day they began moving deeper and deeper, but we kept catching them.
Way out there, but if they were right next to the bank.
As the bite began to slow down, I started adding crappie nibbles to my jigs.
Spoon.
Dennis hooked this nice walleye, but the net was hung under the driver's seat and my brother couldn't get it out. So Dennis kept fighting it around for a while, and when we couldn't get the net out, he decided to try to lift the walleye into the boat. And as usual, the walleye cut the line. I don't know what this guy was, but he sure pulled good for a while. By about 12 o'clock, the fish had almost stopped biting. So we decided that we either needed to quit and go home or find another place to fish. So like all stubborn fishermen, we looked for another spot. Like always, when the fish don't bite, you start changing things. So we were changing colors and changing lures and changing the way we retrieved the lures and changing where we fished, but nothing seemed to work. When the fishing slows down, I start playing with my camera. And that was what I was doing when Dennis says, "Why don't you take a picture of that deer over on the bank?" When we were catching fish earlier in the day, the wind was blowing. Later, the wind began to subside. When the wind began to slow down, the bite began to slow down. And we got to the point where we were not catching very many fish at all. But when we moved to this new spot where the wind was once again blowing, we had a brief resurgence in the bite. So either that helped us or the deer gave us some good luck, one or the other, but we had a brief time that we caught fish again. Although the bite had significantly improved from the lull that we had had earlier, I needed to be going home. I had an hour and a half drive facing me and some fish to clean, and I had company coming that night, so we decided to head in.